Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today, I'm joined by Deirdre. Deirdre, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I love it. And I'm excited because you are going to talk about data and you know so much about it. Your journey follows. I loved how you explained it to me earlier. Before we dive into the episode, Deirdre, could you talk about your journey, how you got into marketing, and a little bit about your background to set the stage? Because I think it's super applicable to the subject for today.
Absolutely. So I'm Deirdre Hudson. Again, glad to be here. My journey started when I was in undergrad, and I really wanted to be an accountant. I wanted to be a CPA. I was studying accounting, and back then we wrote letters. So I was writing letters to the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, trying to get information. And I ended up working in the marketing department of a human rights organization. And we were using direct mail. We were doing lots of behavior-based and demographic-based segmentation. And I was fascinated by that. And I was fascinated by the fact that a row of numbers in an Excel spreadsheet could indicate an entirely different type of person or household than another row of numbers. So I changed my major to marketing, and I stayed at that human rights organization for about 10 years. And while I was there, as I prepared to move to another position, I developed this idea that good marketing was based on getting data, analyzing data, and using data. So I had spent those 10 years in the analyzing data part. And now I went to a role where I was able to then start focusing on learning how to get that data, how data was stored, understanding relational databases, understanding ETLs and schemas and all that stuff. And I spent about 7 years doing that. And then I wanted to start using it. So I wanted to start using all this, this knowledge about data and how it was stored and how we could segment it and analyze it and use it to target prospective customers. So that's what I've been doing since then, working across a variety of B2B companies, large and small, across different industries. And yeah, so it's been a fun ride. And I learn something new every day, which is awesome.
I love that. I love that. I love your journey, how it follows this collection and analyzing and utilizing, like you talk about. It's the full spectrum of how we can use data. So I'm excited about the subject for today on content attribution and attribution in general. When you look at it, everyone has a different take. They talk about multi-touch, first touch, last touch, dark social. How did you hear about us? And this, like, there's so many different things. There's a lot of business and a lot of money in attribution. When it comes to attribution, Deirdre, what are your opinions? Where do we get started? Where do some people maybe get it wrong? What should we focus on when it looks like attribution? How do we up our game and actually get better at looking at attribution in general?
Well, I'm going to give you what's going to sound kind of like a backwards answer, but we get better at it by releasing our grip on it. And I'll give you a little bit of a history. Just going back to what we all saw on TV with Mad Men, and that famous quote about, I know that half of my advertising is working, I just don't know which half, right? So we started to want to spin away from that, and we started spinning away from things that we called quote unquote vanity metrics, right? So open rates, click-through rates, follower counts. We had started to place a high value on that. And then I think at some point, a couple things happened. Number one, we started to kind of game the system, right? We started focusing on just those numbers as being important and as being success metrics. Then when we started merging and getting into the performance marketing area, where now we started to be able to measure where the dollars were going, right? Because we were using things like paid media and, paid social and things that we were able to actually attribute a spend and a result to. So we started to focus more on that, and kind of what we call brand marketing took a back seat to performance marketing. Now in where we are now, a couple of things have happened. We're post-pandemic. We're in the creator age, right? We're in the creator space. And I think that we're starting to come back a little bit, not full circle, but we're starting to try to incorporate those branding related things into our marketing because people are connecting more around content. They're connecting more around messaging that is based on emotion as opposed to kind of the typical B2B just functionality messaging. And we're getting back to at least understanding that some of those things that we kind of discarded in favor of performance marketing make sense. What we are doing right now is we are being hyper vigilant about attribution. We are hyper vigilant about we have to assign an ROI to things. If we can't attribute dollars to it, then we're going to stop doing it. Some of the people who are not quite there yet, they're not looking at community-led growth. They're not looking at things like engagement. They're still kind of in this area of like, we have got to focus on if we can't measure the ROI, we shouldn't be doing it. And I think that's detrimental. We need to have the pendulum swing back, not so far to the left where it was just about engagement. It was just about the kind of quote unquote brand stuff. Not too far to the right, where it's just about performance and just about if we can measure. We need to land somewhere in the middle where we understand that we are marketing to people and we're not going to be able to measure every single thing. And we can get into some data and stats about that. I'll take a breath there.
I love that.
And if you get me started talking about marketing, I'm going to sit here and talk about it all day. So.
I love it. I love it. This is exciting. This is super helpful. And I agree 100%. I think that we're either too loose on marketing attribution or maybe we're too tight on it and we try to measure too much. When you look at attribution, what are the most important things to track? Where do you spend your time and effort, and where should people really focus their attention when it comes to attribution and what they're tracking?
Yeah, I think that it starts with, again, taking a step back and being able to look at the entire customer journey as much as we can, right? And starting with the person being kind of the centerpiece of that. Who is that person? What are their watering holes? What do they talk about? Where do they go for information? Understanding what a person that I used to work with so eloquently called it micro ecosystems. Understand what their micro ecosystems are. And then understand that we want to be in those micro ecosystems in ways that make sense. Now, that can be through partnerships, that can be through building community, that can be through building a referral network, whatever it is. And those elements may change depending upon, who you're talking to or who your target audience is. But I think it starts being able to take that step back, understand your target audience from that holistic standpoint, and then figure out where do I need to be? How can I be there organically? Or how can I be there in the best, most authentic way? And then you can figure out what you need to measure, right? Some people are just not doing events anymore because they don't have an ROI from the event. Well, how do you know you don't have an ROI from the event? We've thrown out those old playbooks where you go to an event, you come back with a list of targets and then you start smiling and dialing and you expect to get business from that right away. It doesn't work that way anymore. I heard a quote. I listened to a webinar that Chris Skolek from Demand Base was on. And he said that we're looking at trying to do this attribution. We're only using about 5% of data signals that's out there. And that kind of blew my mind, right? Because I knew that we are not looking at everything, but to hear it put in those terms, so that means we're ignoring 95% of what's going on. So back to that event idea, how do you know that event didn't start the spark of a conversation, of an idea, of building a relationship that will eventually lead to something? We're too quick to just cut stuff off and say, if it's not delivering ROI right away, then it's no good. So that's where I think that we are sorely lacking.
Yeah, it makes sense because I think a lot of times, like you said, the performance marketing, right? We can measure the 5%. And a quote I've heard is 97% of your audience is not willing or ready to purchase right now. And then there's 3% that is. And it sounds very similar to the 5% as well. We can track people really well that come to our website and convert or click on AdWords, the 3 to 5%. But the 95%, we don't really track. We don't really know. And when you look at the 95%, when it's building relationships, it's getting your name out there, do you have things you do measure? Or is a lot of it just, hey, we know our audience is here, we want the message to be there? How do you start to look at the 95%? Like what are your initial thoughts on really measuring or at least understanding the value that you can bring to that space.
Yeah, it's again, I always go back to this, this taking a step back, because we're so tightly wound and so tightly aligned to our measuring, our marketing measurement sticks. So I'll give you an example. A company that I worked with in the past, we were running LinkedIn ads, and initially we were getting a really great click-through rate on the LinkedIn ads, which I think is typical, because it's something that's new. And if your audience hasn't seen it before, there's a curiosity there. But like anything else, it tapers off. So we received an invite to RFP, and it was a pretty substantial value for that particular potential contract. And that lead came in as a, quote unquote, a direct lead, a direct source lead, meaning they had just come to the site and typed in. And now instinctively, I know no one's just going to wake up one day and just go to your website, right? They heard about it from somewhere. So what we saw was that through a tool called factors.ai, we saw that this person that had come to the site had been viewing our LinkedIn ads for about 2 to 3 months beforehand. Never clicked on an ad, so they weren't in any of the attribution reports, but they were viewing the ads. So now, what do I say, right? Because if I'm looking at my LinkedIn click-through rates going down, I don't see any leads coming into the site from LinkedIn. We're not seeing anything, any LinkedIn source leads, right? We look at it strictly through this ROI model. The tendency is like, oh, you got to cut LinkedIn. It's not working. It is working. You just can't measure every part of it that is working, right? So we need to, I think as marketers, we're in this kind of chicken and egg conundrum, right? Because we've got to demonstrate value before we can get some tools, but the tools help us demonstrate the value. So yeah, so that's like.
I love that. I love that. So if you're a content marketer, and I think a lot of us in marketing agree, like we need to build our brand, we need to get our message out there, we need to provide value. They need to see this over and over and over again before anyone's interested in looking at our product. And it's not just going to be, I ran an ad one day, suddenly they clicked on it and they bought it, with no prior recollection of who we are, what we do, especially in some B2B, high contract dollar situations. Like that'll take a long time of them feeling the pain. So if I'm on a marketing team or a contract or a content marketer, and I'm trying to explain this to my boss or executives and get buy-in on this idea of awareness and branding and relationships that are going to be almost impossible to track, what would your advice be? How do you approach that conversation and ultimately get the buy-in from the rest of the team to invest in this in a more long-term sustainable strategy?
That's a really good question. And I think it's something that a lot of marketers are struggling with today. And it really is, you've got to score some initial smaller wins, because you need to use that to open the door to kind of gain the trust that you can go on and do some of those bigger things. So I would say that whatever win you can score that you can demonstrate with data, I would try to do that. And then use that as kind of your leverage and your building blocks to go on to the other stuff. Because especially if you have a senior leadership team or a CEO or a CFO that either doesn't fully buy into this whole marketing, and I'm doing quote unquote, the whole marketing thing.
Yeah.
There's still some people out there that don't buy into it, right? I think I don't know what they think, it's a fad or something, but.
So, it's a really long fad.
Yeah. So a multi-billion-dollar fad, right? But, but you have to be able to show them something that they can relate to, that they can at least use to give you some latitude. And it's tough. It's tough. I'm not going to say it's easy. That's why the CMO has the shortest tenure in the C-suite. I think we're seeing a lot of turmoil in marketing right now. A lot of myths are going around, and we're going to be doing a talk around that soon as well. So it is hard, but you do have to be able to show something, give something, and then use that to get other things. Yeah.
I love it. Well, we're coming close to the end, but I have one final question. So I'm really fascinated. If you had to pick one metric to track, like the ultimate golden metric on marketing, especially for content, what's like it's weird to ask this, but like, what's your favorite metric to track? What's something that you feel like gives you a lot of insights, something that you're really proud of and that you can really talk well to that explains a lot of information for you?
Oh my gosh, put me on the spot here. The way that I usually answer that is to say it's about the revenue. It's always showing that revenue has increased, right? And, we tend to go into this whole marketing influence and try to say these are marketing influence, these are not marketing influence. I'm sorry, everything is marketing influence. Okay.
Yep.
So if we are increasing revenue over time, then I think that is the biggest indicator. I will caveat that, I will add kind of a bullet point to that. Is like, if you are using a PLG motion, or if you're in, doing SMB marketing with a really short sales cycle, then that conversion metric, I think, is really good also, like your in-month conversion metrics from when a lead kind of demonstrated interest and when they actually converted into a customer. So I would say those are my two favorite. And I love working with companies that are targeting SMBs and mid-market for that reason.
I love it. That's super cool. Well, Deidre, this is super fascinating. I'm sure we could go on for hours, but to keep these episodes easy to consume, really good for people on their commute, we're going to call it good for the day. But Deirdre, if anyone wants to continue the conversation, learn more from you, connect with you, how can they find you online and reach out?
I spend an inordinate amount of time on LinkedIn. So it's that's the best way to find me, Deidre Hudson. Very simple.
Love it. And we'll link to you in the show notes and everything. Deirdre, again, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.